Little Red Riding Hood is back. Hey there and welcome to the Totally Fierce Crochet channel. My name is Thomas and welcome to my very first full Knooking project tutorial for this gorgeous, absolutely amazing piece. It's a hood, balaclava, hoodie hat, beanie, snoot, bonnet, helmet. So I had quite some issues finding the right name for this, so I just named this the KNOODIE hat. It's a super cool and super fun piece. You can make it, of course, in any color. And I also made myself a blue one, and you can even change the pattern here on the sides of the hood and as well for the ribbing. So I better take this on because it is super freezing cold out here in the winter woods basically, but I definitely wanted to come back especially to give you a little bit of Little Red Riding Hood. As you can see, you can wear it like this with or of course without the hoodie, then it's just basically a cowl. You can take this up when the wind gets too cold, and if you need the full protection, just put the hoodie on it as well and you're good to go for the cold winter weather. Now I think this is such a super cool and super fashionable piece. I don't want to miss it from now on for all winters, and I feel like a little child wearing it actually. I wore these kind of hats in my childhood as well, and I'm probably not the only one. And it's so much fun to nook this KNOODIE. And it is super fun and super easy and also super fast to make this KNOODIE, and I can only invite every one of you to join me to make one for yourself. Now I was super happy to see how much you like nooking, this for most of you new technique, and I absolutely enjoyed showing it to you and also making this Knooking 101 series. I will refer to the series a few times because you can make the KNOODIE hat with basically all the techniques and all the patterns that I showed you, and some new ones like this one, the moss stitch, the beautiful moss stitch. So are you ready for your first full Knooking tutorial with me? Then let's nook! So here we go. If you want to make yourself such a beautiful balaclava, snoot, helmet, call it how you want to, I think it's just absolutely amazing and super cute and super fun. And ever since I had this finished, I was like, I have to make myself another one, or even also a third one or a fourth one. You can never have too much of those awesome pieces, especially for the colder days in winter. So of course I knew if I make another one, I will definitely record it for you so you can make yourself such a beautiful piece as well. And I will do some minor changes, but I will explain, of course, everything. The things that you need are, of course, the Knooking hook. I'm going to choose the blue one, which is a 6mm. And the yarn that I'm going to use, you've seen it in my video with the yarn haul, is the Pinguin Pingo First 6 from France. And it's a chunky yarn, a bulky yarn. And it also says that we would need a 6mm hook or 6mm needles to use it. And I'm going to choose the red for the hood part and the gray for the border and the inner part. And I think they also look quite nice together. So this is my color choice. You will be able to make the full snoot with just these two skeins, which is of course awesome. From the light blue, this was all that was left, just a little ball of yarn. Then of course some scissors and a yarn needle to sew in the very last ends, but I can already tell you there won't be a lot of yarn ends to sew in, which is of course perfect. So we can start. So we are going to start basically with our hood part in the bottom and then work our way up and then make some decreases up here. In general, this tutorial includes almost all of the techniques and the patterns that I showed you in my crash course knooking video, the knit with a hook video. Some of you have probably seen it. If not, be sure to check it out, because I will also show how to make the individual stitches. If you want to have more detailed instructions for knooking, then definitely check out my playlist, Knooking 101, where I show exactly how to do the cast on, either with a chain or with an I-cord, how I do the individual stitches that I also use here. So check this out before starting this tutorial and get used to knooking a little bit more. So what would be helpful for such a project where we would do a hood would always be to use a hood that you already have from a hoodie, for example. In my case, I used a hoodie of mine just to see how long the base of the hood will have to be. Just as a measurement, it never hurts, and either way you can always put the work over your shoulders and see how it would fit. So since I made this, I already know how many stitches I have. But since you haven't done this project before, I will show you how I measured it. And the first thing was that I just started with an I-cord, of course. You can absolutely do it with an I-cord. If you're not comfortable making the I-cord as the beginning, you can always chain. If you do the I-cord, make sure to wrap the yarn around your neck 3 times at least, so you know about how many yarn you would need for the I-cord, and then just make a slip knot to start your project. And if the I-cord is new to you, I will of course show it to you. So from the slip knot, you take the end yarn that you just took aside and wrap it around from the front, and then take the yarn that goes to your yarn ball and wrap it around from the back. Now you have 3 loops on your hook, and you just take this last loop through the 2 loops on your hook. And this we do, in my case, 54 times. You make it as long as you think it should be, according to either your hoodie or when you place it around your neck, to see how it would fit like. Don't make it too loose, because the fabric afterwards will stretch out a little bit. So just be careful with that. And I'll meet you once I have my length of I-cord done. So here we go. I have my 54 stitches now as an I-cord. If you have yours done as well, make sure to put it around your neck to see if it fits, and then we can directly start with round number 1. And here the pattern I made here was like a complete trial. I had no idea. I was like, I'm just doing it like this and see how it turned out, and it got like this beautiful effect, which I absolutely love. For this tutorial, I'm not going to make this pattern here. I'm going to make the moss stitch instead. You will also find a video for the moss stitch in the Knooking 101 playlist. If you still want to follow along with this pattern, you can follow these directions. It is a 4-round repeat, and it needs a multiple of 4 plus 2 stitches. So remember, when you have your I-cord or your chain, the number of stitches should be a multiple of 4 plus 2. Then the first round is a full round of knit stitches. Round number 2 is a full round of purl stitches. And then in round number 3, we are going to alternate stitches, 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches, and repeat right until the end. And these are also the plus 2 which means that in the end you will have 2 knit stitches in row number 3, and row number 4 is just the complete opposite. You start with 2 purl stitches, then 2 knit stitches all the way through, and in the end you will have 2 purl stitches. And this pattern, this 4 rows, you continue right until the top of your hood. So if you want to do this pattern here, I might make an episode in the future for this pattern in my Knooking 101 playlist. But for now, I just want to make the moss stitch for this second balaclava hood, snoot, helmet. And now we would be basically good to go to cast on our loops, but always remember to put the helper yarn in your hook. It happened to me a few times that I just started and then out of the sudden I realized there was no helper yarn. So we are going to place the helper yarn now first. And for that, I still have some of the blue color left. As a reference about how long your helper yarn should be, would be to have it at least twice the length of your work, even a little bit more, I would say, just to be sure, but not too long, because when the helper yarn is too long, then it might get stuck here and there, and this is something that we definitely don't want. And then just take your Knooking hook and place the helper yarn in there. Make a double knot to secure it. Just like this. And we are good to go with our very first round, our cast on. And if you have made the beginning with the I-cord just like me, then the first loop is already on your hook and we can continue. If you have made it with a chain, make sure to go into the back bumps of your chain, and from there we can then start casting on all the loops throughout right until the end. And something that I have been asked after the first video that I put up about Knooking is, how does it work with longer pieces? Because I only show it with 15 stitches or 20 stitches. So when I have it like this, you just pull it along your hook, and then later on the loops will just fall on the helper yarn, and like that you can carry the hook throughout your project. And with the hook and the helper yarn, of course, all of your loops are safe. So here I made a few more. Now I'm just pushing it along. And as you can see here, the first few loops are already on my helper yarn. And like this we continue. So it doesn't really matter what size of project you want to make. If you want to make like a super big blanket or whatever, you can do it and you will never lose a single loop with this method. And here we go. All our loops are there, and now we do as we did it before with Knooking. We just pull the full first round on our helper yarn and make sure to not pull it all the way through. Always leave something at the end that your loops don't fall off the helper yarn. And now we are good to go with our first round or our first row of the moss stitch. Again, there's a video about the moss stitch in my Knooking 101 playlist, so if you want to catch that first, make sure to do so. Otherwise, I will show you also how to make the moss stitch in this video. The first 2 rounds are the same. We are always going to alternate between knit stitches and purl stitches, and then we switch around for the rows 3 and 4. So in the end we have a 4-row repeat, and let's just start with the first one. You grab your first hook, yarn over and pull through to make your first knit stitch. Then take your yarn to the front, grab the hook, the next loop from the side, yarn under and pull it through to make a purl stitch. And this is like we continue all the way through this very first round, and I'll meet you when I'm at the end. And here we are at the end of our official round 1. And if your stitch count was correct for the moss stitch, then your last stitch should have been a purl stitch. By the way, if you still struggle a bit finding out what stitch is what when you see it on the hook like this, whenever you see like this little bump, this little knot in the bottom of one of the loops, you always know that those are purl stitches, and where you don't have that bump in front is then of course a knit stitch, just as a little reference. And now I can take out my helper yarn, so I'm just dragging on that lower part here, pull it out, and then again pull my work on the helper yarn before then turning. And row number 2 is super easy because it's the same row like we had it before. We start with a knit stitch and then continue with a purl stitch and then repeat those 2 stitches all the way through, and I'll meet you of course at the end of row 2, because then we are going to switch it up. And I'm at the end. Again, I finished with a purl stitch, which is correct, and then I can take out my helper yarn and put my work again on it. And we can continue with row number 3. And in row number 3, we are going to switch it, which means on top of the 2 knit stitches or 2 purl stitches to knit, we are going to now make 2 purl stitches in the beginning, then 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit. So that means we have to bring our yarn to the front and then just yarn it off and then take it back again. Only the beginning is a bit tricky and a bit weird, but it will all make sense afterwards. And then again pull it to the front, make the next purl stitch over the 2 knit stitches, and like this we just continue all the way, and I'll meet you at the end of row 3. Now, since we switched the stitches, we now have a knit stitch at the end, and then we can finish it off by taking our helper yarn out again and pulling everything on the helper yarn, and now we are good to go. And the same thing, so the first 2 rounds and the 3rd and the 4th round are always the same. So we start again with our purl stitch, which always works a little bit different when you do it at the corner, but just take the yarn through, that's also fine. Then a knit stitch, and then we continue alternating purl stitch, knit stitch, and so on right until the end. And then our 4 rounds, the 4-round repeat, is already complete. And this was it, our 4th and final round of this moss stitch repeat, and like this we continue. So we do the 4 rounds on and on, always in repeat, to get our beautiful moss stitch. And we do this, let's take out my reference again with the hoodie that I have. We do this right until we have like some sort of a height like this. So this really depends on how tall you are, how big your head is, how big your hoodie is that you chose as a reference. So before there's this rounding that starts here, this is where we stop, because then we are going to make some decreases to get this rounding before then closing it up in the top. And I will meet you once I reach that point myself. And until then, happy nooking! So here's where I am with the beautiful moss stitch. I hope you can see it on camera. In real, it looks absolutely amazing, super gorgeous, and as you've seen, it's super easy also to make. Of course, it's a little bit tricky with the alternating knit and purl stitches, but I mean, the result always pays off when you have such a beautiful piece. And now I'm also at the point where I would start decreasing for the rounding of the hood part. And in that case, it's always also good to compare again with the example piece that you hopefully have in your closet. So it's basically here, this part now with the rounding, and for that we are going to make a full set of stitches. So the 4 rounds that we had before, we are going to make the same ones and then start decreasing always here in the center. And for that we are just basically put the piece together to identify the center of our hood. And you, of course, you can also count. I mean, I had 54 stitches, so at 26 it should be the center. It's right here. Let me just place the hook there. Now it would be good to have a stitch marker or something to mark it. If you don't have a stitch marker at hand, of course you can always just use a piece of the other color that I'm going to use, and I'm going to use the gray. So we can then also easily, because those 2 stitches, stitch number 26 and stitch number 27, are going to be the ones to be decreased, and I will just put that in here. And I will nook just until this point, and then I will show you how to make the decreases. So now I'm right here. My last stitch was a knit stitch, and usually here would be like a purl stitch and then again a knit stitch. I will make it easy for myself and just make a decrease with a knit stitch through both of them. And for that I'm just going through both of the next 2 loops and yarn over and pull it through, and like that I just made a very simple and super easy decrease, and from there I will just go along. Later on I just have to remember that here now I had like 2 knit stitches after each other, but that's no issue because in the next round I'm going to make a decrease of those 2, so it should match up perfectly with the pattern, and this is where I will then also meet you again. So I'm almost there, and here you can also see, you can still see our little stitch marking yarn right here. So I know that those 2 are then purl stitches. In the previous round they were like both knit stitches, and I'm just doing the same thing. I will just purl them off, both of them together, and for that I'm taking my yarn to the front, and then I'm going to the second loop and then to the other one and do the exact same thing like I usually do my purl stitches, and then I will just go through both of them, and like that I made another decrease and can now continue with my pattern. And I'll meet you in a little bit, because in the next round we are going to do another single decrease, and I'll meet you when I'm there. So for this third round of our 4-round repeat for the must stitch, we are actually going to make a double decrease. So we are going to decrease the next two that are right on top of our stitch marker, and we are going to decrease those two just so that we can get like a rounder part for our hood. And the first decrease I'm going to make as a purl stitch, because here the second one is a purl stitch as well, and here we ended with a knit stitch. So I'm just going to take my yarn or the loops, both of them up, just like we did it before on the other side, and then just take them both like this. And then we are also going to take the next two, and for those two I will just do a knit stitch, and in that case make also sure that all your stitches here are a little bit tighter together so that you don't get any holes that you don't want to have. And like that we decreased this part as well, and now we can continue with our pattern as we had it before, knit and purl stitches alternating. And I'll see you in round 4 of this repeat, where we will make another decrease. So I'm at the point where I placed all my decreases, and the next one I can tell you already is going to be a little bit special because we are now going to decrease 3 stitches at once. And for that we are just picking up the 3 loops that we want to decrease, those here, and mainly because here then we have another purl stitch, and here I stopped with a purl stitch. So we have the 3 loops, yarn over and knit stitch through all 3 of them. Again, keep it a little bit tight together so you don't create any holes that you don't want. And then the next stitch is going to be a purl stitch, and from there we can just finish the round. And I'll meet you when I'm at the end, because then we are going to finish our hoodie off already by putting the top seam, and I'll meet you there. And as you can see, we created the rounding for our hood. I know it's not like 100% super round, but I think it just works awesome. And then the only thing left we have to do to finish our hood would be to cast off in the top. And for me, the easiest way to do it, because when you have a piece like this, of course you could go around first and cast off each of those stitches individually, but you could of course also cast off 2 stitches at once, one from each side, so you don't really need to go around first. You can cast off already, and this is how it works. So we are going to pick up our first loop, and then we are going to pick up the last loop, and then take our yarn and just slip stitch through it. And this is what we do all the way. You can, if you want to, place the working yarn in the center and do as if we would crochet 2 granny squares together. For those who know my granny square tutorials and how to crochet them together, this is the exact same way. So it's another combination of 2 techniques, and I think it works just perfectly. Of course, you get a seam in the top, but you can, if you don't want to see the seam later on at the top of your hoodie or KNOODIE, then you can always reverse it so that the seam is on the inside, but that is completely up to you. We are just going around stitch by stitch, or 1 stitch from the front and 1 stitch from the back, and then slip stitching through both of them. And the closer, of course, you get to our decrease part, the more difficult it gets to pick up those loops. I think I only have 6 left. And for those last 4, I will actually do something different because I just want to decrease them as well. And for that, I'm just going to cut off my yarn. And then I will slip stitch like that. Then I will take my yarn needle. Here it is. And then I will just take all those 4 loops that are still missing, like that. And I will keep this loop up here and pull the yarn through just to secure it. And then I will just pull on it to close it to get a super awesome perfect rounding. And now we can take out the blue helper yarn here because we don't need it anymore. And what I'm going to do, and since I already have my yarn here on the yarn needle, I will just sew this piece of yarn in already by going through some of the stitches, and just in case there were any holes from the decreases, you can then later on easily fix them by just going through them once more. This one looks quite nice, and then we go to the inside, because personally I like to have this little seam on top, but feel free, if you reverse it, it looks almost invisible. So we can then just incorporate our yarn end in our fabric. And at the end, just to be sure, another knot somewhere, but I think it should be absolutely fine. And like that, the hood part is done. And here's how it looks. really love how this rounding worked with our moss stitch. Really pretty. And now the next part for our KNOODIE is the seam here on the side that I made with the double knit, so both sides look the same. Someone already told me that this is basically some sort of a tube. So there's one side and there's another side. I absolutely love how this is done because it's super easy and super fun. And for me, I think it's the perfect squishy ending of our hood part. So I can't wait to get this started, and for that I'm going to also switch to the gray color. So first we would have to cast on our stitches for our border basically, and we are also only going to work in the back loops only. So we start right here in the bottom, you place your hook there and just take the next yarn color, in my case it's the gray, and just pull it through. And from there we just go from back loop to back loop. Sometimes they can be tricky to find. Where is it? Here is it. And then just pull our next one through and continue all the way. By using only the back loop will give us later on a pretty nice and clean border. And you just go through each of them, and I'll meet you once we are at the end. And when you reach the top, there are actually two possibilities. You could either use this first stitch here from the top, or you just take the first stitch here on the side. Personally, I just love to skip this top stitch here and go into the next one on the side, and from there all the way down to the end of the hoodie side. And don't worry if you have like so many loops on your hook and on the helper yarn. This is absolutely correct because the double knit technique basically needs twice the amount of stitches that you would normally have, but in the end it will shrink together and give you the beautiful texture, so no worries, this will definitely work. So I reached the end. Now it's time to like push all those loops. There are so many on the helper yarn. Make sure to not pull it too much so that in the end your helper yarn is still there and all the loops are on there, just like this. And now we are good to go with the fun part. Because now we are doing the double knit, and for that I'm going into my first stitch and I'm just going to make a knit stitch, and then I push my yarn to the front, grab the next loop, push my yarn back to the back, and then make the next knit stitch, and again the yarn to the front. Just pick up the next loop, don't do anything with it, and then yarn to the back again and knit stitch. My yarn skein is trying to bug me, and I'll show it again. Yarn to the front, grab the next loop, yarn to the back, grab the next loop, knit stitch, yarn to the front, grab the next loop, yarn to the back, knit stitch, and so on all the way until the end. And when we return, we just do the same thing, only in the opposite way, so that in the end we get this beautiful texture. So now I'm at the end. I have one pickup, and then my last one here is another knit stitch before we can then take out the helper yarn. Like this. I know there are now so many stitches. And I'm just going to show you how to start the next round, because from there it's really up to you how wide you want the border to be. And I'm good to go. So in the previous rounds where we made the knit stitches, you can now always see those little bumps in the front. And that means that for this round, we are just moving the yarn around it. And wherever we don't have the bump, this will be our next knit stitches in this round. So I'm going to pick up my loop, and my last one here was also a purl stitch. So in that case, I'm just going to take my yarn to the back already and just make the next knit stitch, and then go again to the front, pick up the next loop, go around it and knit stitch. And in the end, all the purl stitches will move to the back and we will only have our knit stitches visible. And again, you do this for as long as you wish until you reach the size of your border. Here I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times 2, because in one round we make one stitch and then in the other one 2. So this was 12 rounds. It's about 2 inches of a size, so you can also make it just half of it or a little bit shorter. That's up to you. And once you have the size of your border, we are then just finishing it off, casting it off, and then going directly into the lower part of our KNOODIE. And we will do this without any cutting, so we keep the yarn like we have it and continue with the lower part automatically. And I will meet you once you have the size of your border. So here we go. I made 12 rounds in total. So in the end, I would have like 6 perfect V-stitches on top of each other. It's double-sided, so the inside looks exactly like the outside. And we can now cast off this border for our hood part. And again, this goes very easy. We start with a slip stitch in the first one and then just grab loop by loop and slip stitching. This will also be a little bit tighter because we have the double amount of stitches, but you will see this will work perfectly all along. And here we go. This was the end. Just to be sure, let's make a slip knot or a slip stitch, and then we can also release our helper yarn, because like this our border for our hood is done. So now we are ready to connect both sides and then add the neck part of our piece. And for that, I'm just going to place the 2 sides together so that in the end, of course, here's the opening for the face. And here we can then start by making our cast on for the neck piece. And I'm also going to release that one slip stitch that was only to secure everything. So now what I'm going to do is to align the stitches on top of each other so that in the end we can work better in them. And I will also leave our first and this last group up here, so I will only go basically here on the side in the stitches, and I will make single crochets to connect the 2 together. So I'm going through both sides from the top and the bottom with my working yarn up here, and I will just yarn over and pull it through. I will now also make sure that my end yarn is on top of my work, and I'm yarning over again and make a single crochet to connect those two and to incorporate the yarn end. I'll show you the next stitch. So it is right here, and then I go to the other side and grab them, pull the yarn through, and in that case I only slip stitch through it, so I have it connected in there. Then I go to the next, right here, and slip stitch, and then here to the next, and slip stitch, and again, and now the two parts are connected. What I will do is to now jump directly to my red part here, and again here I also have the red end yarn. I'm trying to incorporate this as well, and I will just go from there in our first stitch, which is right here. Here is it, and we just slip stitch. We are only going in those back loops only that we have from our I-cord or that you have from the chain, depending on which way you were doing it. So only in the back part of the loop, so that in the end we can keep this part of V-stitches in the front, and like that we just continue all along, and I will meet you at the end. And then also make sure to count your stitches, because if you want to do the typical classic ribbing, you would need an even amount of stitches. I will decide, maybe I get like a number that's a multiple of 3, then I will do a different kind of ribbing, but of course I will show you. So see you once I'm all around. And I reached the end. I now have, I think it was 60 stitches across, so that's absolutely fine. And now again, if you want to do the classic ribbing, then it's quite easy. You just have one knit stitch, then move your yarn to the front and one purl stitch, one knit stitch, one purl stitch all around until you reach the height that you want all the way through. Or if you have it like I have it, that the stitch count is a multiple of 3, we are doing something a little different. So I'm going to release those stitches again, because now I'm going to actually switch my yarn or my needle so I can work from the inside out, and then I will do a different kind of ribbing. So I will just take out my knot here, and if it's too tight, just cut it. to release your hook again, and then I'm switching to the other side because then it will be easier. And I will just add another knot right here. And I can now continue by putting the yarn to the back. Maybe I will just finish or connecting the two parts right here. So this was my first knit stitch, and then I do 2 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch all the way across. So always 2 knit stitches, 1 purl stitch all the way. But of course this only really works when you have a multiple of 3 for your work. And this is basically how we continue right until the end. Now the height of your neck piece is really optional. As you can see for my test piece, I mean, it was almost the same height like my hoodie part here. You can make it shorter so that in the end it just covers your mouth, or make it longer as well. You can of course even like fold it one time on the inside. That's absolutely okay. Just check yourself, check the work in between to see how high you want to go with that neck/face piece, because this then really is more like an individual thing to do. But other than that, it's like continuing all along, either with the typical ribbing or with the 2-1 ribbing that I'm going to do with 2 knit stitches and then 1 purl stitch worked from the inside out, mainly because when I then turn it, I will have the 2 knit stitches, the flat ones, in front of my face and not the purl stitches. So this is basically it, or the reason for switching it. But other than that, everything else will be the same. And I'll meet you once I have the final length for my neck piece, and then we will finish it off, and then your KNOODIE hat is done. See you then. So my neck piece is done. This is how it looks. Such a beautiful texture with 2 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch. It's super stretchy. In the end, this part here, this front part here, will be like in the front of my face when I pull it through, and the other side looks like this. And now we can finish this up. So again, I'm leaving this turned from the inside to the outside, so that in the end, when I now add a last border or the cast off in a certain border, that this will be in the front, and this will hopefully look neat. Here with my first piece, I tried it as well, and for some reason on some stitches the lighter blue color comes through, which I don't think looks that super pretty, so I'm doing things a little bit different, spontaneously as always. So what I'm going to do is to first cut my gray yarn like this, because the gray is over. And then I'm going to pull the hook through just until it stops. And then I will also cut my helper yarn. I will leave this in just for now. You can, if you want to, place like a little knot in there, but you don't have to actually. It's just to hold all of the stitches together. This yarn end I will take care later on and just put it downwards my piece. And now I'm going actually to the back of my hat, so that in the end this part here is in the front, just in case the transition isn't super neat and nice, then I can at least hide it in the back. And now I'm taking my red color again, and I'm picking one of my loops here, and first I'm just going to go through it, and I will also incorporate this yarn end, because now what we are going to do is half double slip stitches. If they are new to you, I think I've never showed them before on my channel. I absolutely love them because they also look very knitted. So the way how to do them is to yarn over and then go into the next stitch. Make sure that your end yarn is right over it on top, and then yarn over again and pull it through. And now instead of like yarning over again, we are just pulling through the 2 loops on our hook to finish the half double crochet slip stitch. So again, I yarn over, I go into the next stitch, make sure that this is on top, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the 2 loops on the hook. And it creates these little two yarn strands here that already look like a V. Then here on top we have a V, and in the back we also get a V, so quite a perfect stitch to be honest. And then again we yarn over, pull it through, and now I forgot to move the yarn end in front, so again pull it through, pull it through, and then pull through both of the loops. And this is basically what we do all the way around until we have everything with half double slip stitches. And then we take the helper yarn out, and then we will see how this looks, and maybe we just add another round, but we'll see. So I'll see you in a bit. So now I'm at the end of this round of half double crochet slip stitches. I do like how they look in the front, and I'm not so sure how they look here on the side, so I had the idea of just adding another round of half double crochet slip stitches all in those back loops right here. And for now I'm just going to take out my helper yarn, because then I might also see a little bit better how the stitches will look. Here we go. I hope I had all the loops, otherwise I would have a problem. But it looks fine to me. So now I'm just going to add another round of half double crochet slip stitches, and for that I yarn over, and then I go into this very first stitch in the 2 loops on the other side. I had a feeling that those will be a bit tricky to get, but here they are. So I just yarn over and pull it through as we did it before, and then I go just stitch by stitch, so yarn over and then pull it through, and like that we are just putting another round of half double crochet slip stitches over it to cover up all those parts where maybe there's color peeking through, and I think so far it works. So this is really me doing freestyle stuff. I always change my mind somehow in the middle to see if something else might look better, and usually I don't get disappointed, so I will just go around, always going through the 2 loops on the back, which will then be the outside of our KNOODIE hat. So we'll see how that goes. See you in a little bit. So this turned out way better than I thought, and it's still super stretchy. Here's how the other side looks. And probably by also like pushing those a bit up, we might get rid of all the colors peeking through. So I think this looks super cool and super neat as a cast off, and I'm quite happy with it. So let's finish it. And for that, I am just going to cut off my red yarn, and then I'm going to make a slip stitch and grab my yarn needle and let's make an invisible finish. So we go into the second stitch from where we are, and then pull it like this so that the stitches are on top of each other, and then pull the yarn through until they both have about the same size, and then we can simply sew it in. And like that I can also go around this one stitch right here that's like very visible and reduce it a little bit. Fake it till you make it. And also, I don't know where to go. Maybe just somewhere in there. Of course, I lost the yarn, as always. If you know my tutorials, this happens quite a lot. But nothing but realness here. And we cut it. Now we also have this gray yarn end here. And I will just go up one stitch because this was already still open on that side. And I will push this up a little bit so that we have a knot right here. And once this is done, I'm going in the stitches. Maybe I take one way of those and then go all the way. And then go back in the back loops here. And let's see, you don't see anything exactly what I wanted, so I can cut the yarn. And I think here I still have 2 yarn ends because the yarn was kind of weird at that point. It got all curled up. So I will finish this. And I made a double knot, so I think it should be fine to just cut it closely. We are done. We can flip it over. And here we go. I mean, some parts are not super perfect, but I think when you wear it later on and then also push the inside or the neck part in like that, I think it looks super cool. And I can't wait to wear it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you will have fun making this absolutely fabulous KNOODie for yourself or for someone you love. And I hope to see you back again next time only at the Totally Fierce Crochet channel. Maybe from the woods, maybe from someone else. Who can say? Maybe crochet, maybe knooking. Who knows? Either way, have fun and happy knooking. Bye. Little Red Riding Hood, Little Red Riding Hood. Holy moly, this is so cold out here. I think we are below 0 degrees Celsius, whatever you would call it. Little Red Riding Hood was never good in maths anyway, so back home. See you next time. Bye. Happy Knooking. Greetings from Little Red Riding Hood.